Hello there. Welcome in to a Tuesday edition of the show. So glad to have you, whether you're listening on Extra Sports 1300 or our new home on 740 KVOR. I very much appreciate your patronage. A veritable cornucopia of sports topics coming your way over the course of the program. And I would love to get your thoughts. You could text or call them in at 719 247 1313. Coming up on today's show, have one guest in the 4 o'clock hour. So the rest of the time, it can be you and me conversing, and we will get into the Broncos of it all. Their work week for Buffalo starts today. See if Sean Payton or Bo Nix had anything interesting to say, and I have delved deep and will bring you with me on my deep dive into whether the Broncos, I think we can all agree that they are a better team than they were a year ago. But are they better in the ways they need to be to beat Buffalo on Sunday? So we'll get to that. But we start with a seismic move in the National Football League. And in the end, we use the phrase the end of an era probably too much. This is the end of an era. And as these last few years have gone on, it became increasingly clear that it was going to take something quite drastic for Mike Tomlin to wake up and realize that this thing in Pittsburgh has run its course. 42-21 against the Chiefs in 2021 wasn't that. Missing the playoffs the next year wasn't that. Losing 31-17 to Buffalo in 2023 wasn't that. And neither was the 28-14 loss to Baltimore. But perhaps all of that, plus having a primetime NFL playoff stage to yourselves and proceeding to get absolutely housed by the Houston Texans 30-6 was enough for Mike Tomlin to wake up today and decide that 19 years is enough. And he has reportedly informed the organization that he is stepping down as the head coach, the longest tenured coach in the National Football League. And living in the meaty part of the curve is perhaps the worst place you could be in school and in sports. Right? You either need to be creating the curve, be so good that you're setting that curve, which the Steelers have been unable to do for a decade, or you need to get the benefit of the curve to be bad enough to get that bump that comes along with the curve. Right? Whether it's last place schedule, high draft pick, the NFL has a system in place that if you are bad, you can get good quickly. But the Steelers were seemingly unwilling to do what was necessary in order to make that happen, which is rebuilding their team. They haven't seemed to want to be in a rebuild. So they've been stuck, and they haven't been good enough to win, and they haven't been bad enough to get all the goodies that the NFL gives bad teams. It's the nexus of being just good enough to get your fan base's hopes up, to raise expectations, but not good enough to where you ever follow through and pay off those hopes or expectations. That's where this organization has lived for a decade. And look, maybe there was a time that 5 years ago, 7 years ago, where a season like this one in particular could be viewed as a success. or a bump in the road, maybe, even if you're looking at it slightly negative. Like, all right, we didn't get to where we wanted to go, but there's progress made here. Or maybe it could be finally appreciated that Mike Tomlin, despite the reality of the Pittsburgh Steelers roster, was still able to win a division and get into the postseason. But that's been long gone. And I would imagine that when he speaks, or when more reporting on this situation comes out, as this news has broken earlier today, the words "worn out" will come up, or some version of it. Probably not from him, Mike Tomlin himself, because doesn't strike me as the type of guy that would admit any kind of weakness or defeat. And even last night, after getting absolutely demolished, still there was a defiant nature to the way that Mike Tomlin handled the post-game press conference. I think it's got to be in the reporting around the situation. But I got to imagine it's incredibly taxing for Mike Tomlin to have to be Atlas holding up this roster that has gone through a revolving door of mediocre quarterback play, a lack of offensive weapons, and a defense that got older and worse as they got more expensive. It is, when you take a step back, it is quite remarkable that the Steelers have found themselves in the postseason as much as they have over the last half a decade or so. It really is. And it's a credit to how good of a coach Mike Tomlin is. But if you're in Pittsburgh, and that's what's so fascinating about it, outside of Pittsburgh, there's just this immense respect for Mike Tomlin and saying, how does he keep doing this? But in Pittsburgh, he becomes the face of their mediocrity. He becomes the face of, yeah, we were good, but not good enough. And to not only coach up this roster to be good enough to even make the playoffs, but also ultimately be the one blamed if they don't go any further than that. It's got to be taxing on even a guy that seems as mentally strong and is unbothered by outside forces as Mike Tomlin seems to be. Now, I don't want to sit here and say that Mike Tomlin is blameless in all of this, and I do think that a large part of this is the message growing stale, that him not resonating with the veterans in that locker room anymore. Or maybe his message not resonating with the front office, with the powers that be, with the fan base, with the media. So this is not Mike Tomlin is a victim and Mike Tomlin had nothing to do with it. For all we know, Mike Tomlin signed up and was a proponent of, no, pay all my defensive guys and let's just bring in Duck Hodges and, Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers, and let's just do this because I want my defense. I don't know that we know for sure whose call that ultimately was. But the biggest issue, whether Mike Tomlin had a large voice in that or not, is their inability to acquire talent at the sports and all of sports' most important position, which is quarterback. They have gotten this so wrong since Ben Roethlisberger. And that is the reason why they're stuck in neutral. Because they haven't figured out that position. And really, there's no surefire path to success. But the better path than what the Steelers have done, the more tried and true path, is to rebuild and get the draft pick that comes along with it so you could start fresh with a young quarterback. Now, they dabbled in this with Kenny Pickett, but Kenny Pickett is a different circumstance. Right? I'm talking about having your choice. I'm talking about like in an alternate universe where the Steelers, were bad this year, having a chance at Fernando Mendoza. Not taking the third or fourth quarterback off the board. Having a chance at the first or second best. That is a better path than the one that the Steelers have been on. Or if you don't want to go that route, then you better have someone from the Shanahan coaching tree on your staff. You better have that level of, or that amount of intellectual capital at your disposal to get the most out of whoever your quarterback is. And the Steelers don't have that. Now this is a chance for them to go out and get that. So it'll be fascinating to see whether Mike Tomlin's presence was keeping the Steelers from accepting reality and going into a rebuild. Or whether it's somebody higher up on the food chain than Mike Tomlin that just can't stand the idea of the Steelers winning 5 or 6 games. But if they can go out and get an offensive-minded head coach, young up-and-coming coordinator, no guarantees that he'd work out, but if you get him from the Shanahan coaching tree, then you give yourself a shot. As good of a shot as any coaching tree or any avenue that any team explores to try and find an NFL head coach. And if you want to do that treadmill thing, maybe you can find your next Sam Darnold. But you would have someone in the building that's capable of getting that out of a quarterback. The Steelers, while Mike Tomlin's been the head coach, haven't had that guy in the building. So this it needed to happen because the Tomlin side of this is a little bit more obvious. The Tomlin side of this is in the breakup. That's the person that most people will gravitate towards. Tomlin has more friends than the Pittsburgh Steelers do. In a way, everyone's going to think that Mike Tomlin will be inevitably successful wherever he goes. They still think he has more to give. The questions are whether Pittsburgh can exist without Mike Tomlin. But you have to separate the two to find out. And maybe it comes down to the Steelers with Mike Tomlin, Omar Khan, the whole group there just did not want to accept losing. But now you don't have a guy that's the longest tenured head coach in the NFL. And if it's either Mike Tomlin that's saying we're not tanking, or it's just the organization feeling like, how can we tank when this guy's been on the job for nearly 2 decades and can get us to the postseason, even if we give him lesser parts? It needed to happen. And it's probably long overdue if we're being honest about it. But it needs to happen. And it'll be fascinating to see where Mike Tomlin ends up. And it will be fascinating to see what the Steelers do moving forward. Because if history being what it is, Steelers don't do this a lot. It's kind of not their thing. So the fact that there is a job opening for a head coach in Pittsburgh is fascinating. And I'll let you take the conversation down whatever path you so choose. Because now those two parties are split and they're going different ways. Where's Mike Tomlin going and where are the Steelers going? 719-24-7-1313. I want to start with the Tomlin part of this because there's more reporting that's coming out in terms of the timeline and the situation regarding Tomlin that maybe he's not just free to go wherever he wants. And maybe he's not even looking for a job this year. We'll talk about that next. Just getting going on this Tuesday edition of Drive Time Sports on Extra Sports 1300 and 740 KVOR. If you missed it yesterday, I announced our nominees for our Athlete of the Week, sponsored by Blackjack Pizza and Salads. They are Jordan Rollins of Colorado Springs Christian, Dayton Albrecht of Fountain Fort Carson, Wyatt Kirch of Rampart, and Peggy Dean of Sand Creek. To find out what they did to deserve to be nominated and to cast your vote, you can go to extrasports1300.com or kvor.com. Either of those places you can find it. And we will reveal the winner on Friday's edition of this program. Again, it's our Athlete of the Week, sponsored by Blackjack Pizza and Salads. Mike Tomlin today told the Steelers organization that he is stepping down as the head coach. And immediately, he becomes the number one head coaching candidate on the market over John Harbaugh. It was a nice run by John Harbaugh. You got what, like a week? And now it's Tomlin. However, there is some reporting today that says that because of the way that Tomlin did this, and the Steelers did this, and Tomlin, the headline is Tomlin steps down. He didn't just go and tell the Steelers, I'm done, and then walk out the door, right? Like this was done in concert with one another, right? A mutually parting of ways. And then you can decide whose idea this was, right? But ultimately, they worked together on it. And that's what 19 years gets you, an amicable divorce, and, where still both parties can, be successful in the future. But because he stepped down and he was not fired, Pittsburgh retains his rights. Think Sean Payton, right? Sean Payton stepped down from New Orleans, decided he was going to take a year off, surveyed the landscape. And when he decided to come back, then because his rights were still owned by the New Orleans Saints, they were able to get some draft capital from the Denver Broncos. That is how this is going to work with Mike Tomlin. So my dream scenario, and Tom's as well, said would be interesting if he took the Ravens job. I'll get to your full text, Tom, in a moment. I would love to see Mike Tomlin walk across the street, so to speak, or stay within the division and take a job just to haunt the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't think he's going to do that. Steve Bisciotti, the owner of the Ravens, was asked about it today, and he said, holy bleep, wouldn't that be something? And then he said, only if John Harbaugh takes the Steelers job. So that's his way of saying, of course, the Baltimore Ravens would love to be interested, love to have Mike Tomlin, but we recognize that's not going to happen. I would love to see it. Not going to happen. And it would be further complicated by the fact that the Ravens would have to give the Steelers draft capital in order to get Mike Tomlin. So I just don't see it. I think we're going for, because let's look at the landscape minus Baltimore. You take any of these jobs, this is where I'll get to one of Tom's two texts. Happy for Tomlin, great coach who has been given garbage QBs for the last 10 years and has never had a losing season. I think he'll sit out a year. Giants' job is the only one that's worth taking, and Harbaugh will probably take that. Would be interesting if he took the Ravens job. The Giants' job to me has gotten more interesting the more I think about it. And part of why I've started to revisit this a little bit is because I have watched Philadelphia on Sunday. And then I said to myself, I mean, that entire division is heading in the wrong direction, except for maybe New York, if they get their head coaching pick right. Right? Jaden Daniels incredibly banged up this year. You expect him to be healthier, and I'm not out on Jaden Daniels at all. I think he's got a long and productive career ahead of him. I was never a huge fan of Dan Quinn. And now you have what was a dynamite duo supposedly just 2 years ago with Cliff Kingsbury and Dan Quinn, and now Kingsbury's gone. So I don't know if all is well in Washington. They have Jaden Daniels, and that's a pretty good start. But this year, huge step back. Jaden Daniels banged up, firing an offensive coordinator. Washington's trending in the wrong direction. Dallas is going the wrong direction this year, could potentially, with this draft capital they now have via the Micah Parsons deal. We'll see. And then now you have Philadelphia, who they fired their offensive coordinator today. So, I mean, they might right the ship in a hurry. I think you just have to look at it if you're New York, or look at it if you're a Harbaugh or a Tomlin, and say, right now, the other three teams in the division are heading the wrong direction. This year, they all took a step back. Maybe they all have a chance to get right quickly, or at least a couple of them. But for right now, there is this vacuum to where if I really love what New York has going on with Dart and Scattaboo and that front seven, maybe I can get the arrow pointed straight up for New York and be able to have a couple of years here before those other teams come back at me. But it's a very finite window, because the organizations that I would trust more moving forward is obviously Philadelphia. The best quarterback in that division is in Washington. So for Mike Tomlin, this is whatever he decides is going to be his last stop, probably, right? Guy that spends 19 years and then all of a sudden he's going to bounce around from job to job. I think New York is interesting if you want just a quick fix. If Tomlin's going in and saying, I can build this thing up for a couple years and maybe get a few sniffs at the playoffs before everybody else comes back at me, and then I'm dealing with the fact that the Giants haven't necessarily been the model franchise in the NFL recently. I think it would be a little short-sighted to take the New York job at this point. I think that's more befitting of somebody with a longer runway and with a little bit more patience, perhaps, because there's no guarantee that New York clicks this year. I think if I'm Tomlin and I don't want to stick it to Pittsburgh by taking the Baltimore job, I sit out and I see what happens. Because I'm with you, Tom. Baltimore, New York. Baltimore's the job where you feel like you can have immediate success. The Giants are interesting and maybe a chance for immediate success. Everything else is like, no. No, not Cleveland, not Arizona, not Vegas, not Tennessee. Go on down the list. Mike Tomlin is not taking any one of those jobs. But I don't think he should, other than Baltimore, want to take any of these. Take a year. Learn from your predecessor, right? Your predecessor, Bill Cowher, ended up deciding he didn't want to come back. But we were talking about Bill Cowher for like 3 to 5 years as the best candidate on the market every single year. Carolina was trying to get Bill Cowher. Kansas City was trying to get Bill Cowher. Everybody was trying to get Bill Cowher. I think Mike Tomlin, after spending time in Pittsburgh and kind of being beat up a little bit and getting booed and fans wanting him fired, I think he would relish the opportunity for maybe just a year to be able to sit there and be the belle of the ball, for everybody to fawn over him. And I don't mean everyone, like just the 7 teams that have a job opening. I'm talking about the, CBS, NFL Network, or which is basically ESPN now, Fox, all the teams that have openings, all the teams that don't have openings but would seriously consider Mike Tomlin. I think Mike Tomlin wants at least a year to kind of take a step back, take a breather, survey the landscape, and do what Sean Payton did. Now, Sean Payton wanted the Charger job. Timing didn't work out, like the Denver job, enough because of the Penners to take that job. But I could see something similar with Tomlin, where he looks at this year's and like, I don't know when I want to get back in. A Stefanski or a McDaniel. I think those are guys that are more apt to immediately take a job. Tomlin, I think he's going to take his time. So it would not, it all connects and all makes sense, right? If the Steelers still have his rights and a trade has to be consummated, I don't know that that's something that can happen in one offseason unless there's a place that Mike Tomlin is dying to go to. And I can't say that any one of these openings, save for Baltimore, would be one that I'd be dying to go to if I were an NFL head coach. But I was putting together a list earlier. How many teams in the NFL would not take Mike Tomlin over what they have currently as head coach? To speak to my point about maybe the best thing is Mike Tomlin spends a year being the belle of the ball, because there are a lot of teams that may not be open now, but would be very interested in maybe vacating that position to try and lure Mike Tomlin next year. Here are the teams that I don't think right now would take Mike Tomlin over what they have. Kansas City, Denver, and LA in the AFC West. In the East, I don't think that New England would trade Mike Vrabel for Mike Tomlin. I think they're pretty happy with what they got going on now. NFC West, obviously, those 3 coaches outside of Arizona, Shanahan, McDonald, McVay, I don't think any one of those organizations would seriously consider this. In the North, Ben Johnson, and I have Dan Campbell. Now, I want to see Dan Campbell hire an offensive coordinator and see what he does with that. If he finds one and Detroit doesn't immediately get back to near the top of the NFC, then I think Detroit would drop off of this list. And I think Detroit would seriously consider replacing Dan Campbell with Mike Tomlin. And here are 2 other ones in the AFC South. Right now, I don't think Jacksonville or Houston would trade in what they have for Mike Tomlin. Houston may change their mind in a week, and Jacksonville may in a year. Now, I'm not saying that those teams or any of these other teams would just fire somebody, even if they were mildly successful, to bring in Mike Tomlin. But it speaks to how in demand Mike Tomlin would be and how few teams would look at Mike Tomlin and go, yeah, we like what we have. So I have 11 teams, and stay tuned for Houston, Jacksonville, and Detroit. Those 8 other ones, I don't think, and even who knows? Who knows what the future of Andy Reid is in Kansas City past this year? Who knows what Sean McVay is going to want to do? But for the teams right now with their current head coaching situation, the list is 11 that would probably keep what they had over Mike Tomlin, and 3 of those may be quick to change their mind. So I think it makes sense that Tomlin takes a beat, waits a year, maybe through some back channels, lets certain organizations know that he would be interested in taking that job. There's already kind of one of these feelers, Josina Anderson, reporting that Mike Tomlin would prefer a warm weather city. Tampa. LA, if Sean McVay decided he wanted to change course with his career. But that's one of those. Is it going to ultimately make the difference? No. But this is one of those feelers that you send out. So teams that are in warm weather cities are like, well, we might have a chance at Mike Tomlin. And there will be more of these. Mike Tomlin, especially if Mike Tomlin's on TV. Mike Tomlin goes on TV, starts professing his love for, I don't know, Trevor Lawrence. Jacksonville regresses next year. But I think you'll see Mike Tomlin on television and then go from there. He strikes me as more Sean Payton than Bill Cowher. That by the end of, by this time next year, he'll be bouncing off the walls, wanting to coach again. But who knows? I thought that would be Bill Cowher, and he never came back. So if you're Mike Tomlin, use this time. Don't jump back in just because you love coaching. Because trust me, there will be plenty of teams this time next year that will be fawning all over him, trying to get Mike Tomlin to coach their team. 719-24-7, 1313. Your thoughts on Mike Tomlin stepping down after 19 seasons as the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then there's, of course, the other side of the equation, which is what is one of the most storied franchises in all of sport do now. Take the conversation in whatever direction you see fit as we continue on Extra Sports 1300, as well as our new radio home here on 740 KVOR. The schedule for the divisional round in the NFL playoffs is set, and it will start, of course, with the Broncos and Bills at 2:30 on Saturday afternoon. It will be followed at 6 by the 49ers and Seahawks, and the two-game Sunday will feature the Texans and the Patriots. That is a 1 o'clock kick, and then the weekend wraps up with the Bears and Rams at 4:30. Three of those four games, and I'll just let you in on an industry, I don't know if it's an industry secret, but a little behind the scenes here, and it's been a while since this has been, well, it happened last year, I suppose, but we were a couple of steps away from this happening with the Denver Broncos. The way, because there is obviously a local radio affiliate that we, on a more national level with Westwood One, cannot air Broncos playoff games until the AFC Championship. So stay tuned for that potentially next week. But this week, the three other divisional round games can be heard on 740 KVOR, KVOR.com, and the KVOR app, sponsored by Diversus Health, mental health, and well-being for all. And we had to wait a little while. We had to wait for that football game last night to finish up, as ESPN was withholding the information from us, which I don't think is very nice. But now we know. It's not surprising that the Broncos and Bills are the afternoon game. You have, one of the NFL's premier franchises in San Francisco. You have two West Coast teams, which makes the later window a little bit more appealing. So not surprised. I don't know if that changes your mindset at all. I think if either team in this matchup is disappointed about this, it would probably be Buffalo, because it does make for the shortest of weeks. But not surprising that Buffalo and Denver is the afternoon game there on Saturday. So that's all done. And of course, we found out that the Texans would be the team going to New England rather than Pittsburgh after last night's 30-6 dismantling of the Pittsburgh Steelers, which has led to our big story today, which is Mike Tomlin stepping down after 19 seasons as head coach of the Steelers. Now, he's not the only one associated with that organization that may be looking for a change in career. This may be the last throw that Aaron Rodgers makes in his NFL career.
Rodgers in the gun, 4th and 5. As three receivers, he'll get the snap. It's a four-man rush. He sits in the pocket. There's a line drive down the middle, intercepted at the 50 and picked off on the play by Bullock. He's down the far side, 30, far side, 20, down the far sideline, 10, 5, touchdown. Rodgers has thrown a pick six.
Westwood One Sports on the call. Sort of a muted call from Kevin Harlan, because I think the belief was that the game was probably already over at that point. Perhaps the more consequential play of the game was the sack fumble that Rankins returned for a touchdown. But that is significant because it may very well be the last throw Aaron Rodgers makes in his NFL career. He said after the game that he's not going to make any emotional decisions right now. But I guess I would never say never, but I would be very surprised if Aaron Rodgers is suiting up for an NFL team at the start of next year. I think this is it. And it just is another lesson in Not everybody gets to ride off into the sunset. Not everybody gets the John Elway ending. Even Peyton Manning didn't have the John Elway ending because John Elway went out playing a great game and winning. Peyton Manning was riding in the sidecar in Super Bowl 50, but he still ended up going out on top. And a lot of people, as you know, misremember that and think that Peyton Manning was, slinging the ball around the yard as the Broncos were winning Super Bowl 50. And that wasn't the case at all. But even ending like Peyton Manning, it doesn't happen. And there's one in very recent history that is more indicative of the way it goes. Travis Kelce. I believe with every fiber of my being that Travis Kelce was going to propose to Taylor Swift and retire shortly, if not immediately, after the Chiefs beat the Eagles in the Super Bowl. I believe that was going to happen. It did not happen. Perhaps the proposal thing is maybe a little bit too much, but the retirement thing, I got a pretty good feeling about that. And then Travis Kelce went on to say, I'm not going out like that. And what happened? It was worse. It was worse this year than it was the year before. And you have to imagine that for Aaron Rodgers, whether he stays in Pittsburgh, they don't have Tomlin now. So if Aaron Rodgers wants to come back, there is a very distinct possibility that next year is worse than this one. So this idea of having the perfect timing and that John Elway ending to your career, it just, for 99% of players, it just doesn't happen that way. That might be the way that Aaron Rodgers' career ends, might be almost the opposite of John Elway. Now, I know what you're thinking. Well, he made the playoffs. Well, if Aaron Rodgers doesn't even sniff the postseason, then it's like an inconsequential season and it just kind of escapes all of our memory. But when you add in the fact that Aaron Rodgers had a big stage to finish his career on, ending it like that is almost the antithesis of John Elway. Getting embarrassed, playing poorly as everyone watches your career most likely come to an end. The one thing I could say that might be actually the total opposite would be if he had that performance against Baltimore. Because we were all watching that game too. And that would have been him falling short of the playoffs in his final game, playing poorly. So losing the week prior maybe would be more the opposite. But it was certainly not close to the way that John Elway finished his career. But listening to Aaron Rodgers after the game, I think he got out of this year what he wanted. There was a little bit of rehabilitation of Aaron Rodgers that needed to happen physically and from a perception of him point. He was a little bit more muted although he took some shots at the Jets last night and reporters and things like that. But I just think the whole Jets saga was so bad for Aaron Rodgers. The perception of him, but also him as a player, that he wanted to get one decent year. And it was a decent year. The Steelers were never going to be threats to win the Super Bowl. But he was a little less outspoken, played pretty well, got into the playoffs. I think he got out of this season as much as one could hope. Because, again, that John Elway ending is just, there's a reason why it was labeled as a storybook ending, because it doesn't happen in real life. I think he got out of this year in Pittsburgh what he wanted to. He ends his career on a better note. But what I am left with wondering is if he wouldn't have forced his hand out of Green Bay. Could the last few years of his career have been better? The injury is the injury. But he went on that PR tour. That was part of the end of him in Green Bay. Going against the organization, all this kind of stuff, forcing himself out to go to the Jets, that was a disaster. And having to join up with the Steelers to get at least one more decent year out of his career. That's what I'm left wondering. He's a Hall of Famer. He's one of the best quarterbacks of his generation, no doubt about it. But would it have been better if he just would have stayed in Green Bay? More Drive Time Sports right after this on Extra Sports 1300. Welcome in hour 2 on this Tuesday. Reminder, you can watch the show on a daily basis as long as you follow either Extra Sports 1300 or 740 KVOR on social media, because we stream the show live in all of those different places, whether it's Instagram, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Just search for your radio station of choice. Obviously, there's more to find on those platforms. I'm not the only show on these two stations. So bonus goodies by following, liking, subscribing at 740 KVOR, at Extra Sports 1300. And then while you're there, you can interact with the show by dropping a comment. Like this one, for instance, on YouTube from at DanMast160. Hi, Ryan. Hi. Thanks for dropping. I don't know that I get a lot of YouTube comments. So shouts to you, Dan. See, that easy. And I can display it on the stream. Technology, it really is a wonder, isn't it? A big story of the day. Mike Tomlin steps down after 19 seasons as the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Someone who knows Mike Tomlin as well as anyone because he wrote a book on him. John Harris will be my guest in the next segment. Why does he think it was time? And how did, for 19 seasons, Mike Tomlin accomplish what he accomplished? So great insight into the mind and career of Mike Tomlin with John Harris coming up. Your thoughts welcome, either by dropping a comment on the stream or by texting or calling in at 719-247-1313. Let's talk Broncos-Bills, shall we? We now know 2:30 Saturday. Make your plans. That's when the game will kick off. And I talked about yesterday why there's, from a cosmic standpoint, it just feels right that the Broncos will meet up 1 year later with the Buffalo Bills again and get that second shot at them. And you look at this Broncos team throughout this season, and you could point at a lot of different reasons why they are better than they were this time last year, or a week ago last year, I guess, because they played Buffalo in the wild card round. They are a better team, all told, better team. However, what matters to me is whether the Denver Broncos are better in the areas that they have to be better in to beat the Buffalo Bills. Because in these AFC playoffs, and even the NFC, you're seeing this. Matchups matter. And it's not the same thing for every matchup. One thing might matter a lot for the Denver Broncos if they played the Bills, and wouldn't matter as much if they happen to play the Chargers. And you see this on the NFC side. In the game that sticks out to me is, Philadelphia, San Francisco. Because San Francisco, with Kyle Shanahan, is a major advantage over what the Eagles have currently as their brain trust. And that was the thing that made a huge difference. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey and Brock Purdy were big difference makers as well. But to me, the matchups matter, especially on the AFC side. What do you do best? And is that one of the things that your opponent has the most difficult time dealing with? And my take on this matchup is that the Buffalo Bills have more that gives the Broncos problems than the things that the Broncos have going for them, giving the Bills problems. To wit, the three things I said that the Bills have that I think give the Broncos problems. Josh Allen, but that would be for every team not named Kansas City. Every team not named Kansas City has had an issue with Josh Allen in the postseason, right? Josh Allen's a problem for everybody. But also the running game, which Josh Allen is a part of for Buffalo, and the pass defense going against Bo Nix. Those are the areas that I think that the Broncos have to be better in than they were a year ago if they're going to beat Buffalo. So let's start with the run game. The Denver Broncos rush defense is better than it was a year ago. The problem is the Bills' rushing offense is better at a higher clip. They are more improved than the Broncos' rush defense is improved. So that is not an area that you look at and you say, oh, the Broncos have a big advantage there. No, Broncos going against the run game of the Buffalo Bills is advantage Buffalo. As far as Josh Allen goes, I think you could say, all told, he has not had the season that he had last year winning the MVP. However, his completion percentage is up from where it was a year ago. His QB rating is better than it was a year ago. He is more prone to interceptions this year than he was a year prior. But this is where matchups matter. He's going against a defense that has had a lot of trouble turning other teams over. So when you look at the Broncos and how they attack Josh Allen, how they try, you can't completely neutralize him, obviously, but can you give him, can the Broncos essentially provide more resistance to Josh Allen than Jacksonville did a week ago, or just a couple of days ago, as it were? Not when it comes to being better at taking the ball away. Jacksonville has that on Denver. Denver's has shown the ability over the past couple of weeks to be able to turn other teams over. A question is, can they do it? The regular season in total says they can't. But that's what makes Saturday fascinating, is whether this recent uptick in the number of turnovers the Broncos have been able to create is a thing now, is who they are now. Because if they can get Josh Allen to turn the football over, that's, I mean, call me Captain Obvious, that would be huge for the Denver Broncos. In fact, I would go so far to say, as it is necessary to turn Josh Allen over. And then, of course, the Broncos have that pass rush, which can inhibit some of the things that Josh Allen wants to do. But I found this interesting. We're talking about the Denver Broncos getting to the quarterback, sacking the quarterback more than any other team in franchise history, including the Super Bowl 50 team. They had the most sacks by any team in the league by a mile this year, and yet their sack rate is lower. I found that very interesting. I think there's an easy explanation for it. They don't create turnovers. Their offense leaves them on the field longer, and they give up a lot of long drives. To their credit, that ultimately end in field goals, but they're on the field a lot. The teams run a lot of plays against them. So the percentage is not as high as it was a year ago, but obviously the raw numbers say that this team gets to the quarterback as good, if not better, than they did a year ago. The Broncos pass rush is obviously a huge weapon that they can employ against Josh Allen. And again, like creating turnovers, it is necessary for them to get to Josh Allen. But the idea that Josh Allen is far removed from what he was the last time the Broncos faced him, that's just not true. So the Broncos defense has to be better against Josh Allen this time around. My big takeaways as I went through all of these areas. Again, the Broncos are better against the run than they were a year ago, but Buffalo is an even better running team than they were a year ago. I don't know if that's an area where the Broncos can say, we got them here. And that is a huge aspect of this game. Allen, more susceptible to turnovers. Broncos less able to create turnovers than they were in last year's playoff meeting. The Broncos' pass game, I think all told, you would say is improved, even though a lot of Bo Nix's numbers are actually down. I mean, that's the thing with Bo Nix, and we'll have a bigger conversation about Bo Nix when this playoff run ends, whether it's Saturday or somewhere down the line. But I don't think Bo Nix, from a statistical standpoint, took a step forward. But he didn't drop off either. Not demonstrably better, all told, not demonstrably worse. But Saturday will kind of tip the scales one way or another, won't it? If Bo Nix comes out and has a great game against Buffalo and leads the Broncos to a win, then you will say that Bo Nix was better than he was a year ago. And you will be right in that because there's not enough of a drop-off with his regular season production to say, no, not winning a playoff game doesn't mean he improved. It will, because they will have won. But the problem is the Bills' pass defense is actually one of the better pass defenses in the league. They're not great at getting to the quarterback, but they'll play zone, they'll sit back, they'll put the shell on the defense, and that is the type of defense that Bo Nix has struggled to diagnose, to be able to pick apart over the last month. So I don't know if that's in an area that the Broncos, the places that I looked at to say Buffalo does this, and this well, is that a problem for Denver? And the answer up and down is yes. Josh Allen, the run game of the Bills, and the Bills' pass defense, to me, are all advantages Buffalo going into Saturday. But through this, I found the way. On Tuesday, I am giving you the path for the Denver Broncos to win this game above everything else. Yeah, they should create turnovers. Yeah, they need to hit Josh Allen. Yeah, Bo Nix doesn't need to turn it over. Like, there are a lot of keys here. The one above everything else, if the Broncos do nothing else on Sunday or on Saturday, they must run the football, which is a good thing because that's what they do. That's what they like to do. Perhaps at times Sean Payton has been too eager to abandon it, but the identity of this team is running the football. That's why, while a lot of things are tilting in the Bills' favor, in my opinion, to make them rightly, I think, the favorite to win this game, there is something that the Broncos would not be out of character for the Broncos to do. It'd be very much in character, and it's something that they are better at this year than a year ago, and it's something that attacks Buffalo's weakness, running the football. The biggest key over everything else, if Denver runs the football, they can win this game. Because one, it attacks a weakness of the Buffalo Bills, as I mentioned. Two, it keeps Josh Allen off the field, which is a better bet than having him on the field and hoping to turn him over. And the third thing, if they're running the ball, Bo Nix isn't throwing it. And that is a recipe for success on Saturday. And Bo Nix can be a part of that. I'm absolutely advocating for Bo Nix to run the football. I was on KKTV last night with Corey Roldan, and I said that was one of the big keys. Bo Nix has got to run the ball. He could be a part of it. He could be a big part of the Broncos' success. But I think it's more through his legs than his arm in this particular matchup. That is the path forward. Running the blank ball. They do that, they got a chance. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on the Broncos-Bills matchup. Coming up next, we get back to today's big story. Mike Tomlin stepping down after 19 seasons as Steelers head coach. The man that wrote the book on Tomlin, John Harris, my guest, right after this on 740 KVOR and on Extra Sports 1300. Pittsburgh, my career as a head coach is over. And somebody who knows Mike Tomlin and his path to being the longest tenured and one of the most successful coaches in the NFL currently, and maybe soon will be again, is John Harris. He wrote the book, Tomlin, the Soul of a Football Coach. And John, can't see you, John, but I think I might be able to hear you. How are you today?
I'm good, Ryan. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Does the news of today surprise you at all?
Yeah, kind of. I didn't think that he would ever be fired by the Steelers.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that he was at the level where he was going to actually step down. But it was obvious that there were some issues this year, and it was coming to a head. I thought, and I think looking at what he's doing now, that I don't think he thought it would be that different next year. I think 9-8, 10-7, maybe win the AFC North and get blown out in the playoffs again with this collection of players, because they've pretty much shown what they're capable of doing. His career has been, as far as the complete consummate professional. Never had a losing season in 19 years, but hasn't won a playoff game since 2016. And for folks in Pittsburgh, that was just no longer acceptable. And the media cry, the fan cry. They were booing again last night at the game, fired Tomlin. And didn't take him long to make a decision. I've seen some reports where he had been thinking about it all year. That may be the case.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's got to be taxing, because you mentioned there and there aren't very many coaches where this is the case, where the local perspective of somebody can be so different than the broader view of somebody. But Mike Tomlin, it was definitely that way. Not to say that he didn't have supporters in Pittsburgh or detractors nationally, but for the most part, it was, people would say, oh, you can't fire Mike Tomlin, he get hired immediately. But, this team living where you mentioned they lived, I got to imagine for Mike Tomlin, it got a little taxing at times to kind of be the punching bag, if you will, for why the Steelers are good, but not good enough in the minds of Steelers fans.
I mean, good point. It's night and day.
Yeah.
And I covered Mike's first 10 years with the Steelers with the Pittsburgh Tribune Review. And from day one, I mean, he was not the choice. Everyone thought that Russ Grimm was going to get the job, who was the Steelers assistant. Mike Tomlin at that point was 34 years old. People just really didn't know who he was. Whereas Russ Grimm, Ken Wisenhunt, some of the other candidates were on the Steelers Super Bowl team the year before. The players knew them. The front office knew them. So it was expected that the Steelers would move on in that way. So here comes Mike Tomlin. Nobody knows who he is. He's 34. And even as I wrote in the book, Ben Roethlisberger, the quarterback, had lunch with Tomlin one day and basically told him, you're going to have to prove yourself to us because basically you're not the guy that we wanted. So he stepped into a situation, not only from the players, but also from the fan base and the media that really never truly welcomed him with open arms. And I think the last few years, it's just been really, as you said, national perspective is one thing. The local Pittsburgh media perspective, it's very, very different. And a lot of fans actually were hoping the Steelers would lose. We're hoping the Steelers would have lost last week against Baltimore, but now hoping they had lost against Houston. So maybe the Steelers would fire him. So that's where they come down to. So where in other cities, fans would be happy with a 10-7 record or a 9-8 or what have you. In Pittsburgh, it's no longer good enough.
Why did he get that job in the first place, John, in Pittsburgh?
Well, I talked about it in the book. The first edition of the book, hardback, I didn't know the information at that time, but I found out later it's in the paperback edition. And it's interesting that basically the narrative was that Russ Grimm was supposed to get the job, but nobody could really ever confirm that. Terry Robisky, an assistant coach, longtime NFL assistant coach, worked with Russ Grimm in Washington under Norv Turner, the head coach. They became close friends, good friends. And when Bill Cowher stepped down, Russ Grimm called Terry Robisky and said, "Hey, guess what? I just heard from the Steelers, and they offered me the job, the head coaching job. And they want me and my family to come. This was a Friday. Come into Pittsburgh, and on Sunday we're going to have a press conference. I want you to be my assistant head coach and possibly my offensive coordinator." Day later, Dan Rooney goes into the offices, tells everybody, "Hey guys, I couldn't sleep last night. I had a long talk with Tony Dungy." Tony Dungy, of course, people now see him on NBC, Hall of Fame coach, played for the Steelers, and was also a defensive coordinator for the Steelers. He had a great relationship with Dan Rooney, the late owner. He told everybody in the room that I'm having second thoughts. There's something out there called the Rooney Rule. It's named after me. I work with the Fritz Pollard Alliance, and I just feel like we need to give Mike Tomlin, a black coach, the chance. Really that straightforward. So we have the process of the Steelers calling Russ Grimm and telling him, "Well, hey, don't come to Pittsburgh on Sunday because we're going to hire Mike Tomlin." And then Russ Grimm calling Terry Robisky and giving him the bad news. And that's how I found out from Terry. We just had a casual conversation. I mentioned I was updating my Mike Tomlin book, and he said, "Hey, I bet you don't know how this thing went down." And he told me. And I'm appreciative because he told me on the record. He could have gone off the record, but he was very straightforward about it. No reason to lie about it. So to answer your question, that's how it happened. There was something that Dan Rooney saw or felt, and then 2 years later, the Steelers win the Super Bowl. And some people think that when that happened, when the Steelers beat the Arizona Cardinals, who were coached by Ken Wisenhunt and Russ Grimm, people said, imagine what would have happened if Arizona had won that game. The coaches that were passed over for the job beating Mike Tomlin. So apparently that really just had a profound impact on Dan Rooney. And while so no one's saying that there was any type of lifetime deal agreed to, everybody was of the belief that they're not going to fire him. And they didn't. He resigned.
John Harris, the book Tomlin, the Soul of a Football Coach, as he's mentioning, the paperback version is now available with some additional information on Mike Tomlin, been updated with what's gone on recently with him. And it's just remarkable. You tell the story about how he got the job, and now we're sitting here nearly 2 decades later, and the guy was the longest tenure coach in the NFL. And I guess you go into in depth in this in the book, but in the format that we have here, can you explain what about Mike Tomlin leads himself to be 19 years into the job without a losing season and everything that has happened with his career?
Yeah, it's almost like a tale of two careers. You know, the first 10, they go to the Super Bowl second year, they go to another Super Bowl 2 years later, lose to, ironically, Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers. They continued to be a viable playoff team, couldn't get over the hump after that. And then 2016, they lost to New England in the playoffs, and that was the last year that the Steelers actually won a playoff game. They defeated the Kansas City Chiefs, and then went on to, and people will remember that was the game where Antonio Brown had the locker room incident where he was on camera, and Mike Tomlin was in the background telling the team, cursing, and we're going to get these, whatever. And everybody saw the next week the Steelers went to New England and got blown out. And always a competitor. Ben Roethlisberger was a quarterback, a franchise quarterback, a sure-to-be Hall of Fame quarterback. Antonio Brown, one of the greatest receivers in NFL history. Le'Veon Bell, a receiver. They were top-notch. I always felt they should have gone to a couple more Super Bowls, to be honest, with the talent that they had. But it slowly started to dwindle. You know, Ben got older and older and older, held on to him probably a couple years too long. And then things started to, and then everybody knows in the NFL, you have to have a quarterback. So the last several years, once Ben retired, has been trying to find that quarterback. If you want to point at a lot of the problems that the team has had in recent years, it's not being able to find that quarterback. Again, some teams would like to have that problem, right? Where you're 10-7, 9-8.
Right.
Every year, basically. That's what he's doing. He probably would have done that next year as well. But for fans, they're rolling their eyes at that now. And I think it was his consistency. Just the team was always prepared. The players bought into him. He never lost the locker room, as people like to say. The players swear by him. I'm waiting to see a lot of the comments from the players. I'll be curious to see what some of them have to say. I mean, TJ Watt, their defensive end, Cam Haywood, defensive tackle. I mean, they swear by this guy. They love him. Tomlin, that was his thing, to get them some playoff wins, to get them to the Super Bowl. It didn't happen, but this is going to be very interesting to see who replaces him. Does the team blow it up, or do they try to continue along the path that Tomlin went, as far as playing with the veterans and seeing what you can do?
And I brought that up earlier on in the show. Do you think that part of the reason why they have been, let's say, on this treadmill, going from, they tried with Kenny Pickett, right? But the Russell Wilson, kind of the revolving door of quarterbacks.
Yeah.
How much say ultimately do you think Mike Tomlin had within the Steelers organization in terms of, because I'm just thinking, if it was prudent for the team to blow it up, did Mike Tomlin say, no, we're not going to blow it up? Or I'm just wondering how much say Mike Tomlin had over the roster and over the direction that the Steelers have gone in the last few years.
I mean, I think he had a big say. I mean, especially talking about the quarterbacks. He wanted Russell Wilson. He wanted a vet. I mean, he had Ben. When he stepped in, he had Ben Roethlisberger. He was a young coach, but he had his franchise quarterback in the prime of his career. So he was always used to that. Ben, Big Ben played a long time, great player. But then when Ben left, he didn't have that. He had Mitch Trubisky, and as you mentioned, Kenny Pickett. He's trying to piecemeal it. So he gets a chance to get Russell Wilson. Unfortunately, it was a Russell Wilson, not the Russell Wilson that you remember from Seattle. But
we tried to warn him, John. We tried to warn him after we saw Russ for a couple of years. Anyway, not to interrupt, go on.
Yeah, and Russell, and the thing, he went with Justin Fields to start the season because Russell Wilson was injured in training camp pushing a sled. I guess that's another story. And he's out first 6 games, but and Justin Fields, I think he goes 4-2, but he was always intent. He always said, "Hey, I want to see how this guy played," because Russell Wilson was his guy. And people forget the team went 10-3. They were 10-3 last year, but the bottom just fell out.
Yeah. And
the Steelers lost their last 5 games. Russell Wilson just looked like the life almost drained out of him. He just could not make the plays that he was making earlier in the season. Was getting sacked a lot, making turnovers, and the team just completely fell apart. They got blown out by Baltimore in the playoffs, and Justin Fields and Russell Wilson, they did make an offer to Justin Fields, but he went to the Jets for more guaranteed money, never made an offer to Russell Wilson, and Mike Tomlin had his sights set on, Aaron Rodgers, another veteran quarterback who had played and won a Super Bowl. And that's what he wanted. He wanted a quarterback, a veteran guy that he could just maybe turn it over to and trust. And, Aaron stretched it out for a while. He didn't know whether or not he was going to sign. He brought him in. So to answer the question, he had control over that quarterback position. And not everybody was on board with that with the Steelers. But, that was his guy. Unfortunately, at 42, Aaron Rodgers had some moments. He didn't have enough of them against Houston, and his weaknesses were really exposed, lack of mobility, not wanting to take the hits. The Houston's pass rush just got to him. The offense was a mess, and the defense tried. It was 7-6, and then everything just fell apart. Mm-hmm. So I think he had a lot of control. Now, some people say that he didn't want Kenny Pickett. He wanted Malik Willis, who's now with Green Bay, who started out with Tennessee. I don't know whether that was the case or not. The front office wanted Kenny Pickett because he was from Pitt, local guy.
Mm-hmm.
and a bad year for quarterbacks. And that set the franchise back quite a bit just doing that. So, I mean, I think if he does go to another team, if he does take another coaching job, he's going to have some say in that position and other things that go along, or he may not go back into it. He had that control in Pittsburgh. I don't know if he'll ever have control like that again with any other team.
You alluded to it there. It does, with some of the reporting out there, feel like this is going to be like a Sean Payton situation. Take like a year sabbatical, maybe
Yeah.
go sit next to Bill Cowher on the CBS set, and then kind of reassess. But we thought that Bill Cowher was coming right back, John.
Yeah.
Or like, remember, we thought Bill Cowher was going to dip out for a minute and come right back, and we never got Bill Cowher back. Do you think that there is a decent chance that Mike Tomlin has coached his last NFL game because he will love TV so much?
I talked to his brother, Ed Tomlin, in the book, and he said that he just thought that he described him as a gym teacher, just a coach type guy. You never know the money that's being thrown around now for TV, though.
Sure.
It's amazing, right? So I do see him not going back this year. Maybe only position I could really see is possibly maybe Atlanta, because apparently he's looking maybe at a warm weather spot. That the quarterback situation is kind of dicey, but they also have a nice young nucleus, especially on defense. They have some receivers. They have a great running back. So maybe in Atlanta, but I don't think he'll just jump at a job because, these are not good jobs, so to speak, right? There are teams that are struggling or have losing records. I don't know if he wants to step into that type of situation. Better like Sean Payton, take a time off, maybe do TV or maybe not do TV. Maybe just, I don't know, kick back, spend time with the family, be a consultant with the team. He has a lot of options. I'm sure the Eagle will want to see what other teams are saying right now. But I would not be surprised if he didn't coach next year, and I would not be surprised if he didn't do TV next year.
Well, you're not going to get a better look and insight into who Mike Tomlin is, his path, as John mentioned, kind of it's very interesting the way he got the job, and then lo and behold, he becomes one of the best coaches of his generation. The book is Tomlin, the Soul of a Football Coach, the updated paperback version available now wherever fine books are available. John Harris, my guest. John, this was an absolute pleasure. I mean, the timing of it is just it's one of those things, but I appreciate you taking time and providing the insight, and best of luck with the revised version of what was already a terrific book the first time around. So best of luck with it.
Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate your time very, very much.
Yep. Likewise. That is John Harris, outstanding writer, has covered the NFL for years for a variety of well-respected newspapers, and wrote the book, Tomlin, the Soul of a Football Coach. And what stuck out to me here with it is, like, we know Mike Tomlin, right? Half of my life, Mike Tomlin has been the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. But I don't know, like, how did he get here? And where did he come from? And that's what I find to be the most fascinating aspect of the book, is I just didn't know a lot about Mike Tomlin's background, where he came from and how he rose to prominence to the point where he's taken over the Pittsburgh Steelers. Great insight there from John, and there's even more of it in the book, Tomlin, the Soul of a Football Coach. We'll continue with your thoughts on the firing of Mike Tomlin. Where do you think he's going to end up next, and where do the Steelers go next? Do they know how to interview for a head coaching job? They haven't done it in so long. Drive Time Sports continuing next on Extra Sports 1300 and 740 KVOR. Nuggets fans, don't miss Serbian Heritage Night on January 30th versus the Los Angeles Clippers. Grab the ticket package to score a special edition t-shirt at nuggets.com. And I don't want to guarantee this, but January 30th is the end of January. And I believe there is a certain Serbian that is expected back around that time. Now, please don't make your purchase based on that. I'm just saying, might be added bonus if the timeline is moved up a day or two with Nikola Jokic and his injury. Nuggets, by the way, tonight in Nolens. We'll get to that game right after the Frank Serratori show. So 7 o'clock, we'll be joining the Nuggets in the Pels game here on Extra Sports 1300 on 740 KVOR tonight, which is also technically here. Simulcasting is fun. Air Force men's basketball taking on the San Jose State Spartans. That'll be an 8 o'clock tip. The incomparable Jim Arthur on the call for that one. Again, on KVOR, KVOR.com, and the KVOR app. Let's get to some of your thoughts. Obviously, we've gone heavy with the news out of Pittsburgh that Mike Tomlin has stepped down after 19 seasons. Where does he go? Where do the Steelers go? And here's what you're saying on a variety of platforms. On Facebook, Allison is watching and says, we still have Big Red. We'll be back. Go Chiefs. And that was Allison. That was not me. Although I will say Allison quickly becoming one of the favorite viewers on Facebook with a comment like that. Yeah, right now I have 11 teams right now that I don't think they would. And it's not to say that Mike Tomlin's not as good as their coach, but just the situation that they have with their current head coach is good enough to where they don't need to seriously entertain bringing in Tomlin. I have 11 teams. Kansas City's obviously one of them. Denver's one of them. LA, the Chargers, well, both LA teams for that matter. But there are 3 that I think check with me in a year when maybe Mike Tomlin is ready to come back. Houston, Jacksonville, Detroit. Right now, they would be no's. Year from now, we'll see. Dan Campbell's got to get the offensive coordinator right. And if he does that, he'll be fine. I think Jacksonville's got some staying power. I think Houston. My guess is they all stay on the no list a year from now, but those are the teams that I can foresee a year from now maybe having a change of heart, especially if Mike Tomlin is interested. And wouldn't 2 of those 3 places qualify for being warm weather, which is the only bit of intel we know when it comes to Mike Tomlin's preferred next destination. So sorry, Detroit, if that is the be all end all, but Houston and Jacksonville would fit that. Let's get to here. Want to hear this from a Steelers fan today. This is Luke saying, longtime Steelers fan here. Mike Tomlin's departure is long overdue. Interesting that Aaron Rodgers put first nail in Tomlin's coffin, beating the Steelers in Super Bowl XLV. Which one was that? Ray Dominguez is in studio. Which one is that? Let me turn on your microphone. With XLV, quick.
I don't know.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't.
And puts a final nail in the coffin with embarrassing loss last night. Ray, since you're in here.
Yeah.
Do you agree with Luke?
I think it was overdue. I think if you look at a lot of coaches, if they're consistently just losing first round of playoffs, they're not getting the leeway that Tomlin's getting. A lot of organizations are cutting him off. But do I think Steelers fans should rejoice and celebrate this? No, because next year when it's a possible rebuild and you're going 4-12 or you have a losing season, and now who are you blaming?
But isn't that and I understand the fan part of it. We always want a scapegoat. We always want somebody to pin things on. But let me ask you, as a Steelers fan, and I'll ask Luke by extension because Luke is texting in. Hopefully, Luke's still listening. Isn't that what's necessary? I'm not saying you tank. NFL teams don't tank, but you and I have talked about this. You are curious about Will Howard.
Yeah.
So roll out Will Howard next year. Maybe you do finish with 4 wins, but can't the argument be made that that's maybe kind of what the Steelers need, like this purging wildfire to kind of start back over?
Yeah, I think that's been a lot of my take too for a little bit is Steelers have to stop going to a veteran quarterback and start developing for their future. With Rodgers, it was fun, but when the rumors started coming out, oh, he might come back for another year. Why? Because it's just going to be a year and then what? So no, I agree. Maybe you're right. It is time to just look for the future.
Whether that's Will Howard, it should have been Justin Fields.
See, that's another thing why Tomlin, in my opinion, that was one of his biggest mistakes, was letting Russell Wilson ride that season out when he was starting to go on a downfall instead of plugging Justin Fields in. I think that was a huge mistake.
And at least seeing, like, right. I know people that listen to this station or listen to this show before will go, oh, God, here comes Ryan with the Justin Fields truther stuff. But whether it's Justin Fields, whether it's Will Howard, I don't know how you feel. Probably Kenny Pickett doesn't apply here. But just the idea of you got to go a young quarterback. Yes. And if that young quarterback doesn't work, then okay, but they haven't really tried.
No.
In Mike Tomlin's tenure to go with the young quarterback in the way that you need to stick with a younger quarterback.
Yeah, it always feels like let's get a veteran quarterback to put a bandage over. That's always the answer. Yeah. We just need a better quarterback. We've seen, in the past couple of years, even if a quarterback doesn't do great right away, take the time to develop and he might surprise you.
Are you doing okay? Just overall, it's been a whirlwind 24 hours for you Steelers fans.
I know. Last night was terrible, like I told you. Today was very shocking. The most important part of this, I think, is he stepped down. It wasn't he was fired. He stepped down.
So they hold his rights.
That's another thing. It's people, he can go here and here. Well,
Baltimore.
if you want to go somewhere, they have to agree to give up something. So I'm just saying, I know Vegas is looking for a coach. They hold the number 1 pick. First pick for Tomlin. Steelers get Mendoza.
And drops that bomb, and then he has to leave for the Frank Serratori show. We'll pick that up. That's why he's a good producer. Ray Dominguez, also the voice of Steeler Nation, along with Luke. We'll continue to take your thoughts, the 3 stories that are driving the show, coming up after this break on Extra Sports 1300 and 740 KVOR. Hello there. Welcome in. Tuesday edition of the show. Great to have you, whether you're listening on Extra Sports 1300 or our new home 740 KVOR. Excited to be on both stations. Looking forward to hearing from you, regardless of which station you listen to. And you can do that by calling or texting into the show at 719 24/7 1313. Perhaps you might have a thought or two on these, which are the three stories that are driving the show today, which, again, my piece of imaging is missing from my computer, so I have to awkwardly stall, and now here we go. All right, we start with a game that maybe ended two careers simultaneously in Pittsburgh. Here's story number one.
Rodgers in the gun, 4th and 5. Has three receivers. He'll get the snap. It's a four-man rush. He sits in the pocket. There's a line drive down the middle, intercepted at the 50 and picked off on the play by Bullock. He's down the far side, 30, far side, 20, down the far sideline, 10, 5, touchdown. Rodgers has thrown a pick six.
Westwood won on the call, as heard on Extra Sports 1300. It became abundantly clear over the last few years that only a very drastic thing could make Mike Tomlin wake up and say, I think I'm done coaching here. And maybe it was the previous playoff failures coupled with last night's 30-6 beatdown at the hands of the Houston Texans, or maybe it was just that game in particular. But either way, Mike Tomlin woke up this morning and said, me in Pittsburgh, that's run its course. And today, after 19 seasons as the head coach, more years than any current head coach has at his current spot, Mike Tomlin steps down. Now, this had to happen. And I think it's quite long overdue, in my opinion. These two sides have to separate. They were just in a relationship. I don't want to say that it was toxic or it was like bad. Again, they didn't have a losing season. They made the playoffs a lot. So let's keep in proper perspective what we're talking about here. Maybe for Pittsburgh fans, it was toxic and disastrous, but by most standards, it was a pretty good 19 years, right? But right now, this has been an organization that has, for one reason or another, been unable to be a true contender for a Super Bowl, which is the standard in Pittsburgh. And they have been unwilling to go the complete other direction, which is to throw their lot in with a young quarterback. And if they're bad, then they go out and get their next guy. It would be unbecoming of the Pittsburgh Steelers to tank. But there's a world here where you can have a bad record and not be tanking. Right? And I was just talking to Ray Dominguez about this in the last segment. Like, maybe you have something in Justin Fields. Maybe you have something in Will Howard. Try it, see, and if you're bad, then guess what? You're going to be in a position to be able to draft a better quarterback, or you find your right guy. But the Steelers, for whatever reason, were unwilling to do that. So they were stuck in this NFL purgatory for years, and it wore down Tomlin, it wore down the players, and it wore down the fan base. And now with these two sides splitting, now we can see if the Steelers truly want to go in that direction. I don't know for sure. I don't know if the Steelers were like, we got to rebuild, and Tomlin was saying no. I don't know if it was Tomlin saying, hey, we got to go with a young quarterback, and, had the author of a book about Mike Tomlin on in the last hour. And from everyone he talks to, Mike Tomlin has been very in favor of the direction of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And when it comes to the quarterback position. So he was a part of this. But now maybe with Tomlin gone and that influence gone, maybe the Steelers say, you know what, we're going to do this thing. We're going to get into the young quarterback business and we're going to build this thing back up. And for Mike Tomlin, he gets to go out to a place that is going to welcome him like a hero. And the way that Mike Tomlin has been treated, and like, look, we're talking like booing in the stadium, okay? That kind of treatment, fan treatment. I got to imagine it will be a nice change of pace for Mike Tomlin to have all these fan bases falling all over themselves, hoping that their team makes Mike Tomlin their next head coach. So this is good. This is good for both sides. If Tomlin makes the right decision about where he continues his coaching career, and if the Steelers make the right decision, which is whether it's Will Howard, whether it's a quarterback in this draft, that they go for a young quarterback and rebuild this thing. Now, as far as where Tomlin goes, because he stepped down, the Steelers retain his rights. If you want Mike Tomlin, you'll have to do what the Denver Broncos did. And if you recall, the Denver Broncos gave up a first, second, and third round pick for Sean Payton, which, ask any Bronco fan, what they'll go full Les Snead, F them picks. Well worth it. And a lot of fan bases are going to say, well worth it to get Mike Tomlin. But you have to trade for him. Now, Baltimore is not happening. As much as I would love to see it, it's not happening. Giants are kind of interesting. The Falcons have been thrown out as a potential spot. My gut tells me Tomlin does not coach in the NFL this year. And Sean Payton could be kind of a blueprint here. Sean Payton took a beat, waited until there were some really good jobs open. He was hoping for the Chargers. Chargers didn't come open. The Broncos came open, and he took that job. And that was a good decision on his part. And then you have Harbaugh, who was out for a very long time, different circumstances, I grant you, but Jim Harbaugh picking a situation with a franchise quarterback. And yes, even with what happened Sunday night, Justin Herbert is a franchise quarterback. That's the type of gig that I think Mike Tomlin needs to find. Because if I were to throw out one thing that is a negative, it's his endorsement of this quarterback treadmill the Steelers have been on. He needs to go to a place like LA that we're like, we have a quarterback, but we're just not maximizing our potential with this quarterback that we believe in. And that's why I said earlier, of the 11 teams that I think right now would be like, yeah, I don't think we need Mike Tomlin. What about Houston if they get run out of Foxborough? Or if they lose this week and then next year they regress, or same with Jacksonville. They look promising. They look to be on the come up. What if they backtrack next year? CJ Stroud, Trevor Lawrence. What if Dan Campbell doesn't get the OC right? And I know Jared Goff is not looked at as one of the most talented quarterbacks, but you could do a whole heck of a lot worse than Jared Goff. I think Mike Tomlin's best destination, and you can fill in whatever team you think that might be. I think they need already kind of what the Steelers had when Tomlin first took that job. Doesn't have to be Ben Roethlisberger, Hall of Famer, but a quarterback that is there and he's their guy and they're building around him. I think that's the perfect spot for Mike Tomlin, because I would be worried if he took a job because he loves the veterans and the defense of the team, that he would be prodding the organization, oh, just go out and get this guy, this quarterback or this quarterback. I don't know. I don't have a lot of play. I've named 3. Who knows what the NFL landscape looks like a year from now? How about Cincinnati? I know it's going to be tricky to trade for him, or maybe Joe Burrow ends up somewhere else. A lot can change, and that's why I think that Mike Tomlin will take this year, because none of these jobs jump off the page as, oh, you got to take it right now. And he's going to spend a year, and everyone's going to put him at the very top of the list of coaching candidates. And there might be a surprise firing of somebody between now and then. And Mike Tomlin will be happy that he waited a year. Let's stick with football and go more locally for story number 2.
You're constantly evaluating where you're at, where we need to go. You know, my mind's always thinking about what we still need, maybe what's missing.
That was Broncos head coach Sean Payton about a year ago after the Denver Broncos lost to the team that they're about to play in the divisional round, the Buffalo Bills. And what Saturday will show is whether those internal thoughts Sean Payton had led him in the right direction to get the players that not only will make the Broncos closer to the Bills level, just in general, but make them a more formidable matchup for Buffalo than they were a year ago. And as I'm looking at this matchup, the things that Buffalo does best, which is having Josh Allen, which is their run game, and which is their pass defense, I would say that the Denver Broncos don't have all they need to counteract those things. In fact, the best thing that I think that they have is the pass rush to be able to get to Josh Allen. So they have more to contend with him than I even think they have to contend with the run game of Buffalo in general, or what they have on the other side of the football to contend with Buffalo's pass defense. So while certainly the moves and the internal improvement from the Denver Broncos have shown that they are closer to Buffalo than they were a year ago, I think we can agree on that part. I don't know if they have everything they need to beat Buffalo, which is right now the most important thing. But as I look at this matchup, there's one aspect of the Denver Broncos that Sean Payton prioritized maybe above all others, that he went out and improved. That is the key for the Denver Broncos to win this game on Saturday. And it is their run game. Yeah, they won't have J.K. Dobbins. Got to get through Buffalo and maybe J.K. Dobbins after that. But I think R.J. Harvey has shown enough. I believe in this Broncos offensive line enough. And if Sean Payton permits, you do have a quarterback that can be quite good at running the football as well. The key for me for Denver to win is running the football. It attacks a weakness of Buffalo, which is their run defense. It keeps Josh Allen off the field, which I think is the best way to go about it than to hope for a team that has been starved to create turnovers to suddenly turn over Josh Allen 3 times. And it somewhat negates one of the Broncos' biggest liabilities going into this game, which I think is Bo Nix, the passer. So if the Broncos win on Saturday, I promise you, one of the main reasons, if not the biggest reason, will be the run game, because I think it goes exactly right at the biggest weakness of this Buffalo team. But Sean Payne has to stay committed to it. If he is, Broncos going to have a chance to win this game. And now let's stick with Colorado sports, but go to a different Colorado sport for story number 3.
McKinnon out of his own zone. McKinnon away from Nylander for a second. Nylander able to steal it back off the boards. McKinnon has the track back here. Backdoor Nylander scores.
Connor McGahee on the call for Altitude Sports Radio. You heard it right here on Extra Sports 1300. Perhaps, unfortunately, if you're an Avs fan, and yes, the 17-game home winning streak is, in Jason Kosminski, voice of the Nuggets, words, over. 4-3 loss in overtime to the Toronto Maple Leafs. It had to end sometime, and I actually don't think last night was a bad way to end it, considering Trent Miner was in goal. The third goalie, or the top minor league goalie, with Mackenzie Blackwood still hurt and Scott Wedgwood needing a night off. Trent Miner in there, bad matchup with Trent Miner going against the Toronto Maple Leafs. And last night was just a track meet. Who's going to outscore the other one? And the Avs, to their credit, were able to tie the game. Marty Necas, with his 21st of the year with about 4 minutes left in regulation, gave the Avs a point, which against an Eastern Conference team, not the worst case scenario. And then we went to mutant 3-on-3, not really real hockey, and the Maple Leafs won. You take the point, understanding that you had essentially your third string goalie, you're a little banged up, and you're playing against a team that, as much as Toronto has struggled, they do have a lot of firepower. It felt like the ingredients were there for an Avs loss. The fact that they got it to overtime, I know that's not the Avalanche standard, but given this stretch that they're in right now, it's not a bad result last night. Cale Makar, Brock Nelson, by the way, the other goal scorers, if you're keeping track at home. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on the 3 stories that are driving the show. The text line is filling up, and I would like nothing better than to get to those texts, which I will do because I have the power over such things. That is coming up next on 740 KVOR and Extra Sports 1300. 4 outstanding Athlete of the Week nominees to choose from: Jordan Rollins of Colorado Springs Christian, Dayton Albrecht of Fountain Fort Carson, Wyatt Kirch of Rampart, and Peggy Dean of Sand Creek. Vote by logging on to either extrasports1300.com or kvor.com, and we'll tabulate the votes, or a computer will do it for us, and we'll announce the winner on Friday's edition of the show. It's our Athlete of the Week, sponsored by Blackjack Pizza and Salads. Lot of texts. I want to go to the texts. So these are in no particular order. Just going to run through them, so we'll bounce back and forth between Broncos, Bills, and then Mike Tomlin. This coming in from Donnie, who has a vested interest in this move. Tomlin to Baltimore, Harbaugh to Pittsburgh. LOL, just kidding. If you missed it, Steve Bisciotti, the owner of the Baltimore Ravens, was asked about the idea of bringing Mike Tomlin to Baltimore. And he said, holy bleep, that'd be crazy. And then said, if John takes the Pittsburgh job, then maybe. So basically say, in a sports world that we crave rivalries, where a half-hearted handshake between Ben Johnson and Matt LaFleur was met with universal praise because, yeah, Packers-Bears rivalry, don't be dapping each other up. I do, in some way, as much as I would like to see Mike Tomlin in Baltimore in that storyline, I do kind of like the idea that, yeah, that's not going to happen. Harbaugh's not going to go take the job in Pittsburgh, and Mike Tomlin's not going to take the job in Baltimore. Be amazing. Love to see it. Not going to happen. Let's see. Brett, Mike Tomlin has been struck with 2 types of cancer: Russell Wilson cancer and Aaron Rodgers cancer. Both of them have proven fatal for Mike Tomlin. And not to get on a soapbox, but there are certain behaviors that in real life cause such things, and we do that to ourselves. And in this regard, when it comes to, and maybe we'll use a different word, but when it comes to Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers, Mike Tomlin chose this. Wasn't like, oh, what a bad deal it was. What a bad beat for Mike Tomlin that he has to deal with Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers. He chose them, which is why I say the best landing spot, the highest probability of success for Mike Tomlin, part 2, go somewhere that already has a quarterback that the organization is like, no, this is our guy. Like, we love you, Mike. We want you to coach our team, but this is the quarterback you're going to coach. Jobs like that don't usually come open, and yet Jim Harbaugh just took one a couple of years ago. So it's going to be threading the needle, but if you're Mike Tomlin, shouldn't you hold out for that perfect job? Shouldn't you be saying, I'll only be, only take over for Andy Reid in Kansas City, or take over, Tampa, may give Todd Bowles one more crack at it, apparently. I'm surprised that Tampa didn't fire him this year. But Todd Bowles, Buccaneers don't go anywhere, and you're looking and you say Baker and you say Igbuka and Vita Vea and Detroit, if Dan Campbell falters this next year. To say stranger things have happened, that exact thing has happened. There have been jobs where we look and say, man, they got a quarterback, they just need the head coach, and then that team decides, you're right, and then Mike Tomlin said, oh, that's a perfect job for me. I'm not saying you're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole here with Mike Tomlin, but there's just not, other than Baltimore And New York, you don't really have that. And is Jackson Dart right now the type of quarterback that Mike Tomlin wants to coach? I don't see it. Wait a year. Guy's 53. Look at the AFC West this year. Mike Tomlin's got an eternity to come back to the coaching profession. See what shakes out. But he was part of the reason why the Steelers had their plan at quarterback. So if there's one negative about Mike Tomlin, one thing that I got to say, Mike, give you the keys, except for this one thing, just to make sure we got our quarterback. We're good. We don't need your input here. But we would love for you to coach this team up and to get us over the hump. A couple of texts here about Broncos Bills on Saturday. Albert says Broncos are a week rested. That's the reason they win. Buffalo must travel again. And certainly if we expanded the conversation to those kind of other variables, what I presented was an X's and O's football thing. But Albert's 100% right. And Scott Van Pelt, I think, mentioned this to one of the Texans players last night. Like, the path that the Bills are trying to take, it's not usually traversed successfully. I think that there are mitigating circumstances like the overall how wide open the AFC is, that if there is a year where somebody comes from one of these wild card spots and represents the AFC in the Super Bowl, this feels like it would be the year. And if there's a team to do it, it would feel like there's one led by Josh Allen. But having to go on the road again is a plus for the Denver Broncos. Having the bye week, I think, is a huge plus for the Denver Broncos, because I think they were a team at the end of the year that looked a little bit worn out, especially on the defensive side. I think they needed all that this week entailed. Rest, preparation, mentally resetting, all of that stuff. And now the Bills got to travel on a relatively short week, clear across the country to play you. Those are also advantages for the Denver Broncos. So we can add them to the list with the run game of the Denver Broncos. Run game, home field, health. All reasons if you're going to pick the Denver Broncos. Oh, and by the way, Vegas has the Bills as a favorite, so the chip is there on the shoulder of a team that I think wears that chip very well in the Denver Broncos. Ryan says the Broncos are secure the number one seed in the entire conference, and you make it seem like they're big underdogs. I don't think they're big underdogs, but they're underdogs. I don't think they're a better team than Buffalo. And I think the circumstances surrounding this matchup happening, like, you have to say that the Bills are not your run-of-the-mill 6 seed. They're a little bit different than previous 6 seeds in the AFC. So are the Broncos huge underdogs? They're not huge underdogs. Do I think they're going to win the game? Check with me every other day this week. But right now, no, I don't think that the Denver Broncos are beating the Buffalo Bills. I do think that they're underdogs, and I do think that this is a bad matchup for Denver, but it is not one that they can't win. There's just a very specific way that they do it, which is my big point today, running the football, which is not out of character for him. That's the good thing. I'm not sitting here saying that the most important thing is that Bo Nix outplays Josh Allen, because that is foolish to think that that is even remotely possible. Now, there are times where Bo Nix is going to have to make plays, but does he have to be the better quarterback than Josh Allen? Not necessarily, but it would really help. I don't think that the Broncos are big underdogs, but they are underdogs. And I do not think on Tuesday, check with me Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, that they are going to beat Buffalo. This coming in from Alex. Josh Allen is pretty banged up, and Denver has one of the most lethal pass rushes in the NFL. I think that is going to be the difference. The home field advantage in the pass rush will force Josh Allen into a couple of turnovers. That is also granting that the Broncos are capable of securing those turnovers. And this, because everything else you say right there, Alex, other than that's what will make the difference and the Broncos will win, because I don't agree with that part. But what you point out about Josh Allen, I pointed this out yesterday, and it's hard with somebody who is involved in Bountygate to be saying this. But take it as I mean it, and not that I'm suggesting some sort of Bountygate redux with the Denver Broncos. It is a natural byproduct of an elite pass rush getting to and hitting an already banged up quarterback. He's going to be more banged up. He's going to be more injured. No one has to do anything outside the rules to exacerbate the current condition of Josh Allen. It would be a good idea for the Broncos to hit Josh Allen perfectly healthy. But the damage, so to speak, could be greater given who the Broncos are, but also given, I mean, Josh Allen right now is like the dude on operation. He's got a knee, he's got a calf, he's got a hand, he's got a nose, I think. Maybe not a nose. He's got all these things. And the Broncos repeatedly hitting him can make it worse. Nobody's asking them to take him out or anything like that, but football is football. And what the Broncos do very well can make Josh Allen more uncomfortable. And that's why I said earlier of the three things, what can beat the best things that the Bills do? The run game. Broncos run defense, Josh Allen, the Broncos pass rush, and the Bills pass defense, Bo Nix. And out of those three potential counters to what the Bills do best, the one I believe in the most and the one that I think the Broncos can do the most with to try and neutralize the threat that the Bills provide is that Josh Allen piece because of the pass rush that Alex mentions. And this simply, well, there's a few. This is Jersey J. That week game plan should be rush the ball 40 times or more in the game and keep Josh Allen on the bench win the time of possession, game-long drives with touchdowns at the end of it. RJ Harvey, he's going to have a big game. Bills struggle versus the run, especially outside the numbers, which RJ Harvey can run outside the numbers. Yes, right down their throat, run it down their throats, and run some more. That's the key. It's not going to be the be-all, end-all. But the way I would put it is there is not a scenario in which the Denver Broncos win this game if they can't run the football. Like, that's the version of events on Saturday that is impossible. I just don't see a way that the Denver Broncos can be unsuccessful running the football and beat Buffalo. If they run the ball successfully, then it will be okay. There's that. Now it's on to the next thing. Getting to Josh Allen. And it's playing a full 4 quarters. It's winning the special teams game. It's all this other stuff. But it starts with the run game. And more good news, if you're a Broncos fan, Sean Payton's been talking about the way that teams have been playing them defensively. They have to run the ball more. That should be music to your ears if you're a Broncos fan. Yes, more patience with the run, more stick-to-itiveness. That's what you want on Saturday against Josh Allen and the Bills. 719-247-1313. Take more of your texts if you got them, and we'll continue with Drive Time Sports right after this on 740 KVOR and as well on Extra Sports 1300. You will hear more and plenty more on the show tomorrow from Sean Payton as the Broncos begin their prep for the Buffalo Bills. But one item of note, and it shouldn't be surprising, we've been talking about this today, but Sean Payton doing his due diligence or getting an intern to do it. We know how Sean Payton, at times, you would roll your eyes when he would talk about the records of teams coming back from London and that it's better for them to play a game right away than to not play a game right away, and the records of teams after a big win and all this kind of stuff that he does. I mean, he does his homework. You could say that. He has done another item of homework regarding the Buffalo Bills. He charted Bills losses over the last 2 years. Right? Last 2 years of Buffalo losses. They have lost the turnover battle in all but one of them. What did we talk about earlier? Josh Allen this year is more prone to turnovers than he was last year. Right? As we're looking at how are the Bills different, how are the Broncos different. Now, playoff Josh Allen hasn't been prone to a ton of turnovers. I think it's now 14 playoff games. He has four turnovers. Something like that. But, you know, you got to take all of the information in. Josh Allen has been more prone to turnovers. The Denver Broncos, that's why what they were down the stretch, what they were able to do, and it goes back to the Green Bay game, right? Pat Surtain, that brilliant interception, completely turned that game around. We're seeing the Denver Broncos over the last month of the season be able to create more turnovers and for them to talk about creating turnovers. They knew that this was something that they would have to do regardless of whether it was Buffalo or heck, turning over Drake May would help, turning over Justin Herbert would help. Like, it doesn't matter that they're playing Buffalo, but maybe it's even more important playing Buffalo to create turnovers. This has been a constant talking point. This has been something that has emerged down the stretch of the season for the Denver Broncos, but overall this season, they have not done well in creating turnovers. And it's caused their defense to wear down a little bit. This is all very obvious, isn't it? Broncos need to create turnovers. The pass rush forcing Josh Allen into mistakes, and the secondary and linebackers capitalizing by catching the football when it is in their direction. So I talk about the run game being first and foremost. In Sean Payton's mind, first and foremost, needing to win the turnover battle. And it's not just creating turnovers, right? Because this is Sean Payton after all. And we know one of his big things with Bo Nix is those disastrous plays, whether it's interceptions, fumbles, or sacks, that he constantly drills into the head of Bo Nix. You can't have those. So yes, when you think of turnovers, you're thinking, all right, got to force Josh Allen into mistakes. Pat Surtain, got to pick him off, all that kind of stuff. But it's also falls on the offensive side of the football as well. And that's more why I say Bo Nix using his legs is a very, very good thing on Saturday. The more Buffalo forces him to pass it, the worse the chances of the Denver Broncos winning the game. Especially if the Broncos are going to have to go down the field the way they have done against the Charger defense and the Kansas City defense and the Jacksonville defense, where it's bit by bit by bit. More plays, more throws opens up a bigger possibility for Bo Nix to make a mistake. So keys, we'll put together the keys as we move through the week. Key number 1, courtesy of Ryan Kaufman, Broncos got to run the football. Key number 2, courtesy of Sean Payton. I'll let you decide whose keys you should be more concerned with. I'm not here to tell you one or the other. I'm saying both are probably good. Sean Payton says, guy, win the turnover margin, which usually when you're running the football, it does help you not turn the football over. I know fumbles exist, but putting the ball in the air is a tad riskier. So there's a couple of keys. One from me, one from Sean. You decide which one you prioritize the most. But obviously, both Broncos have to do both if they're going to win this game. More on that tomorrow. More Sean Payton audio tomorrow. Tonight, the Nuggets are taking on the New Orleans Pelicans. Nuggets have been able to stay afloat here, thanks in large part to Peyton Watson, your reigning Western Conference Player of the Week. And not to be harsh, but virtually no thanks to Christian Brown. And if they win tonight, and if they beat Dallas later this week, it will be no thanks to Christian Brown because David Adelman says that Christian Brown is at home rehabbing the ankle. I don't know if the Nuggets rushed him back, but it's very clear watching him play, he doesn't trust that ankle that caused him to miss a month and a half. He doesn't trust it. And for a player that is all about, back cuts and explosive dunks and all that kind of stuff, he needs to trust his ankle. So whether he's not trusting it because it's not fully healed or he's not trusting it because he's got a problem between the ears right now, he has been sent home. And what I talked about yesterday about, the fact that the Nuggets paid Christian Brown, they didn't pay Peyton Watson. Now Peyton Watson's balling out, and the Nuggets might have a bit of a conundrum on their hands if they want to keep the flexibility that they earned this offseason to be able to create the deepest team we've seen in Denver since the bubble. But tonight and the Dallas game may not be good nights for Christian Brown truthers because Peyton Watson's going to be taking center stage tonight. He has Jamal Murray with him. He has Aaron Gordon with him, and Christian Brown's at home. Nuggets and Pels, they tip off at 6. We will join that game right after the Frank Serratori show, which is coming up at the top of the hour. I hit on Extra Sports 1300 on 740 KVOR. It will be Mark Levin, followed by Air Force men's basketball. Jim Arthur is in San Jose, where I just came from, for the men's basketball team taking on San Jose State. That will be an 8 o'clock tip on 740 KVOR. Before I go, guys, did you know that low testosterone can cause fatigue, lack of focus, and just you feeling off? Many men don't even realize that that's what's causing it until they get tested. At Synergenics and Low T Center, the TRT test is free. And for a limited time, if your levels are low, they offer testosterone replacement therapy with real medication, not compounded hormones, and expert care. They're the place to go for this kind of stuff. And ladies, you want to take a hormone test? Now, it's now just $99, normally $299. So good time for you to get in as well. Take control of your health today. Walk in or book at getmyhealthfix.com. Synergenics and Low T Center, where real results happen. It's been my pleasure to serve you this afternoon. Great conversation on the text line. Keep it coming. Let's continue it through the week. Tomorrow, a lot more with Sean Payton. And as we start to really hone in on that big matchup, which we now know will be 2:30 Mountain Time on Saturday. Bills and Broncos in the AFC divisional round. Again, coming up next on Extra Sports 1300, it is the Frank Serratori Show. And coming up at 8 o'clock on 740 KVOR, it will be Air Force men's basketball in San Jose State. Have a great rest of your evening, and we'll reconvene tomorrow at 3 right here on both Extra Sports 1300 and now proudly on 740 KVOR.